My name is Kate. Life's got a real funny way of showing you who's boss. Just a short while back, I'd tell you I was hitched to James. You'd see me coming down the hall, with that just married kind of glow. I had faith that quitting my gig at Laurentech for our marriage was the smart play. Love trumps a paycheck, right? Laurentech was this quirky joint. God knows, they had more rules than a prison. One of them serious deal-breakers was about family. James put a ring on it and, boom, we're suddenly in the hot seat. Bossman Joe pulls us in, hands us the ultimatum like we're on some second-rate game show. One of you's gotta roll out, he said, face as serious as a heart attack. We had a back and forth that night that would have made for prime reality TV drama. I guess love made me a little stupid. I blinked first and tendered my papers the next day. Threw in the towel on my up-and-coming tech career to play house. If I knew then what I know now, well, ain't that just life's tagline? Flash to today, and here I am sweeping up cereal because Mr. Promotion on the horizon can't find it in his heart to aim for the bowl. Jim, your mother teach you that? I called out to the other room, my voice getting lost somewhere in the drywall. What's that? He shot back, voice all tight, like my question was a personal attack. Never mind, I muttered, letting it drop. Not worth the hassle. Used to be we could rib each other. Now every word's like stepping on a landmine. Lovely, huh? 2 hours later, he's on the couch, all zoned out in front of the TV, and I'm assessing the remains of what used to be us. We gonna talk or you planning on marrying the couch? I said. James didn't even bother looking my way. About what? I counted to 10 in my head. I dunno, how about us? Where this train wreck's heading? He shrugged. Thought we were good. We stewed in that silence for a while, the TV chattering away to itself. Then it hit me, the realization I'd been living in a glass house someone else threw a rock at. Everything we built, up in smoke, and neither of us knew how to stop the burn. It's funny, ain't it? How fast a life can turn on its head. One day you're planning forever, next day you can't even chat about the weather without it turning into World War III. I stood there a while longer, looking at the man on the couch. He was as familiar as a stranger on a bus. The transition from indifference to cruelty was subtle, but I felt it. It was in the cooling air of the disbanded summer and the sting of a slight wind. Things started changing, like the weather. In the kitchen, I stood there thinking about how things used to be smooth and easy. But now? It felt like walking on ice, unsure if you'll stand or fall. I knew the kind of steak James liked, rare and yet not too bloody, salted and peppered with precision. I had it down to an art, but that day, the oven betrayed me, or maybe it was the other way around. James walked in from the living room, the sound of his heavy footsteps warning me of the mood he was in before he even entered. A second later, there he was, filling the doorway, his eyes taking in the spread as if he was about to pounce on it and tear it apart with his hands rather than sit down to eat like a civilized person. What's this? He pointed at the plate. Your job too tough for you now? His voice was like gravel, rough and scraping. I knew to tread carefully. It's just a bit cooler than usual, James. The steak, I mean. It's not. Not what? He cut me off, glaring. I bit my lip, not saying what was on my mind, because voicing it out loud would only make it worse. Look, Kate, he said, his voice lowering, like that of a predator hiding in the shadows. When I say I want my steak hot, I mean I want to feel the animal's soul leaving the body when I cut into it. This, he tapped the steak with the back of the fork, and it sounded like a judge's gavel. This is dead twice over. He didn't yell, but his voice had a sharpness to it that made my skin crawl. It was almost clinical, detached yet loaded with a venom that was reserved just for me. No loud scene, no drama for the outside world, just the cold, hard words that cut through me. I stayed silent, knowing anything I said would just fan the flames. He pushed the plate away, and his downcast eyes met mine, full of something icy, Son of a… You know what, forget it. He turned his back on me and the food. I'm not eating this crap. He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, his movements jerky. Fix your mistakes, Kate. Or next time it'll be more than just dinner in the trash. The door slammed, a period mark to the tail end of the happiness we used to have. I was left there, staring at the closed door, the click of the latch loud in the quiet of the apartment. As his footsteps faded, I let out the breath I was holding. The steak. It just laid there, looking as forlorn as I felt. The trash can was the next thing I'd have to face, a cold reminder of my mistake. Throwing it away felt like I was tossing a part of myself with it, my effort, my care, my desire to make things work. But none of it seemed to matter. Perfect, they called us. His parents, our friends, they all admired the facade we put up. But behind closed doors, the story was different. Demands grew as my self-esteem plunged. James' favorite pastime became scrutinizing every corner of the house, every dish I prepared. I had no job, no income, just him and his approval, which became scarcer with each passing day. And on the nights his parents witnessed an act slightly less convincing than usual, the sofa was my cold reminder of failing to play the doting wife. Tonight was no different. The dinner table was set for two plus his ever-judging eyes. What's this? James's voice was flat, pointing at the steamed broccoli. Dinner, I replied, keeping my voice even. Broccoli again? Don't you know anything else? He scoffed, pushing the plate away. I bit back a sharper reply, knowing it wouldn't help. I'll make something else if you're not happy with it. That'd be a first, he muttered. The retort stung, fueling a silent anger inside me. I turned back to the kitchen, feeling his gaze on my every move. Where are you going? He barked. I said I'd make you something else, didn't I? My voice carried a hint of defiance I didn't know I had left. James stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sit down. Let's not pretend like you've got other things to do. Your world revolves around me, remember? His words were a leash, pulling me back. Yeah, I remember. I heard him sit back down. No, sorry, no, thank you. Just a heavy silence that settled over us like dust. As the night dragged on, so did his critique. This house is a mess, he announced, seemingly out of nowhere. I followed his gaze. The books on the coffee table weren't perfectly aligned, a pillow was slightly askew, life happened in our house. But not the life he wanted. Clean it up. I wanted to scream. To tell him a house lived in would never meet his pristine standards. Instead, I fixed the pillow, straightened the books, and swallowed the lump in my throat. The place could use some work, I muttered under my breath. What was that? His voice had a sharp edge. Nothing, I said quickly, louder now. Just talking to myself. He eyed me with suspicion, but said nothing more. In bed, I lay awake, staring at the darkness. The chasm between us was filled with unspoken thoughts and stifled dreams. I thought of all the words I wanted to say, the accusations, the hurt, anger, and all the wishes for a life that felt like it was slowly slipping away from my grasp. I was tethered, bound by invisible chains of dependency and fear. Perfect, they said. But perfect was just a word, and words were the cheapest currency in the economy of our sham of a marriage. So there I was, just a regular day heading back from the store, arms loaded with groceries. Never did it cross my mind that a bit of ice on the sidewalk would land me square on my rear, but life's got a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? Down I went with a nasty slip, and the pain shot right through my leg like nothing I've felt before. I tried to get up, but no dice. My leg was having none of it, throbbing like mad. That's when a couple of folks came rushing over. You all right? They asked. Must have seen the whole clumsy show. Trying to keep my cool, I just nodded. I think I busted my leg. They didn't think twice and hailed down a cab to whisk me to the hospital. At the ER, it was a circus. Nurses took their sweet time before a doc finally got to me. He had just one look at my leg and his face said it all before his mouth did. "It's broken," he told me, matter of fact like he was talking about the weather. I grimaced, not at the news, but at the thought of facing James with this. While waiting for the docs to do their thing, I figured I should let my husband know, but the dude didn't pick up his phone. Sent him a text, "Broke my leg, at the hospital," short and sweet, but not even a peep back from him. Turns out, I was stuck there till morning, and the hospital was no hotel, that's for sure. All I got was cold coffee and a nurse who seemed like she'd rather be anywhere else. As soon as I could hobble, they shoved some papers at me to sign and sent me packing in a cab. Back home, the cast was as white as the snow outside and twice as annoying. James was waiting, his face like a thundercloud ready to burst. "No, how you doing?" or "What happened?" He just goes, "Where's dinner?" Really? I'm standing there on crutches, leg in a cast, and he's all mad about dinner? I snapped back. "What do you think? I went dancing. Look at my leg." But he's on a roll, acting like I did it on purpose. "You always have excuses," he sneered. "Can't even do the one thing you're supposed to." Can you believe that? After a night in the ER, all he cared about was his stupid dinner. The whole thing was too much. There I was, hurt and shaking, and he couldn't care less. The air was as cold as that patch of ice I'd slipped on, and I knew right then, this was more than just a broken leg. It was like the ice under us had cracked wide open. I hauled myself toward the kitchen table, crutch by crutch, as if every step was a mile. I was cooking dinner for my beloved husband, it's funny. The bin was near overflowing, and I'd missed it. It was a tiny slip-up, but with James, nothing was ever tiny. "What's this now?" James barked, catching the sight of the unemptied bin. "You're home all day, and you can't even manage the simplest tasks." He stormed over, all bluster and rage, and with one swift motion, toppled the bin, its contents sprawling like a small-scale disaster at my feet. "Clean it up," he thundered. My fingers shook as I reached down, but not from the physical pain of my injury. It was something deeper, a crack in something that had once been whole. That night was sleepless, the echoes of his voice, blending with the hot sting of tears. Morning came with no comfort, just the light revealing the mess of last night. I sat at the kitchen table, papers in front of me, the sound of coffee dripping in the background. James stumbled in, the stink of beer still on him from last night. "Morning," he growled, his voice like gravel. "What's for breakfast?" I pushed the papers toward him. "I've got your breakfast right here." He squinted down at the divorce papers, unreadable for a moment. Then he looked up, a sly, mocking smile spreading across his face. "You serious?" "As a heart attack," I said. Though inside, my heart was racing, like it could bust out of my chest. He threw his head back and laughed, rough and loud. "You ain't got the guts." I clenched my jaw. My voice came out low and steadfast. "Already did it. Just need your sign off." He leaned down, face inches from mine. "You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird, can't even take out the trash." "I'm done talking, James," I said, meeting his stare. "Sign the papers, or I'll have the law make you sign." He scoffed, grabbed the pen with a squeezed grip, and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy and deliberate. He threw the pen down like it was on fire. "Good luck, darling," he sneered. "You'll be crawling back before the month's up." But I wouldn't. I couldn't. This was my line in the sand, the overflowing bin that couldn't take more trash, more lies. Despite everything, I smiled, because that paper felt like the first step on crutches toward a different life. "Crawling's not my style," I said quietly. When I opened my eyes the next morning, everything was too quiet. Too calm. It was weird waking up to silence when inside, I felt like everything was about to blow. That's when he told me. Over a cup of coffee, he said we had to get the property split locked down. And, oh boy, he already had a lawyer in mind. some hotshot in the city, near Laurentech. You coming with me, he said, not asking. We'll get this done today. I really didn't have much of a say with my leg all broken and useless, so I just nodded. He helped me into the car, propped up my cast, and off we went. Everything was fine, normal even, until it wasn't. We were zipping down the highway, the city in the distance, like a bunch of toy buildings. Then he pulled over, sudden like. Said the wheel needed air. I'll check it out, he mumbled. The next thing I know, he told me to get out of the car. Just want to make sure we are safe. His tone was off, and not in a good way. But I got out, leaning on the car for support and feeling every bit as fragile as my plastered leg. He fiddled around by the tires for a minute, and then, without any kind of warning, hopped back in and hit the gas. I mean, he took off so fast I barely had time to shout. So there I was, out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the sound of his car disappearing down the highway. I couldn't believe it. Was this really happening? I didn't have to think twice. My phone was in my hand, and I was hitting record. When he picked up, he was all smug. I've never hated the sound of a voice more. Come back, I yelled. This isn't funny. But he just laughed. Actually laughed. Said something about me getting what I deserved for wanting a divorce. Can you believe that? The line went dead, and the weight of what just happened slammed into me like a brick wall. I stood there on the side of the road, watching the taillights of his car disappear into a blurred speck in the distance. I was alone, miles from anything that resembled civilization. The chill in my bones went deeper than the winter's touch. It was the harsh truth gnawing at me. I was truly on my own. Cars whizzed by, each one felt like a sting. None of them stopped. Why would they? It's not their drama, not their craziness to deal with. I was just some woman on crutches on the side of the road to them. The chill was setting in, biting through my jacket as the minutes dragged on. There wasn't a soul in sight until a gorgeous Jeep truck rattled to a halt beside me. Behind the wheel was the one I least expected to see here. My former boss, Joe. As the car's heater blasted warm air, I could feel my cheeks and hands start to regain some feeling. Joe glanced over at me, his brow heavy with concern. You look like crap, Kate, you know that? He said, gruff, but kindly. Why the hell didn't you call someone? I shrugged, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. Thought I could handle it, I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. He left you on the side of the road with a broken leg? His voice rose, incredulous and angry. That James is a damn coward. I nodded, hugging myself tighter as I remembered the icy wind and the pain. Yeah, I guess he is. We reached Laurentech, and Joe practically carried me up to the 5th floor. The familiar sounds of the workplace surrounded me, a jarring yet comforting reminder of a life I once knew. Inside his office, Joe handed me a mug of coffee, which I clutched gratefully between my hands. The aroma was a heady promise of warmth. Thanks, Joe, I said after taking a tentative sip. The coffee was strong, just the way I liked it, a sharp contrast to the bitter cold I had endured. He grunted, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Can't believe that bastard. After everything. Let's not talk about him, I interjected, keen to avoid going down that road. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. It was a comfortable silence, born from years of working together and understanding the ebb and flow of each other's moods. Joe finally stopped pacing and turned to face me. What are you going to do now, Kate? His tone was serious, the playful edge gone. I don't know, I admitted, feeling lost. I really don't know. His gaze softened, and he took the seat across from me. Look, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. We could use you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left. A spark of something, hope, maybe, or just surprise, fluttered in my chest. You serious? As a heart attack, he said dryly. You were one of the best. Hell, you are the best. I should have fought harder to keep you. I smiled weakly, both warmed and overwhelmed by his offer. Wouldn't be easy with my leg like this. We'll manage. I'll wait until you're back on your feet, literally. He leaned forward, a determined glint in his eyes. I'm not taking no for an answer. The toughness of his words, the undeniable command in his voice, it felt reassuring. Against the backdrop of uncertainty and pain, his offer was a beacon. I'll think about it, I said, knowing full well I'd already made up my mind. I'll think about it, I repeated, allowing a smile to play on my lips. Joe grunted in response, a sound that conveyed understanding and a touch of impatience. Having a purpose, a place to be, and the support of someone who believed in me was more than I could have hoped for given the day's events. It was an unexpected turn, but maybe, just maybe, it was the kind I needed. The air was thick with tension when James headed for the boss's door. The clump of his boots was more hesitant today, like he sensed the storm brewing. He pushed the door, and it creaked open, announcing his arrival to what was once his throne room. There I was, leaning against the desk, arms folded, waiting. James, come in, shut the door behind you, the boss said, his voice an even, ironed-out calm. James saw me and turned pale, but quickly pulled himself together. What's this about? He grumbled like a cornered animal, ready to bite. The boss gestured to the chair, but James didn't sit. Instead, he crossed his arms, a mirror image of my stance, but filled with defiance where mine held determination. James, the boss started, fixing him with a look that could freeze hell over. I always thought of you as a sharp man. But what you've done? That's the sharpest kind of stupid. James shot a glance at me, a mix of fear and anger in his eyes. So, she's been yapping, has she? What lies has she been selling? No lies needed, mate, I said, my voice steady as a heartbeat. Just played him the greatest hits of your ugly symphony. You've been recorded, clear as day. The boss reached into his desk, pulled out a recording device, and slid it across the table. Care to listen for nostalgia? James's face turned the color of concrete. You can't do this. You can't fire me over. Over what, James? Over you terrorizing your wife, my employee? Oh, I can. And I am. The boss cut in, his voice cold steel. James's eyes darted between the two of us, looking for some crack in the armor, some slip of weakness. But there wasn't one. I'll take you to court, he spat out. That's funny, I said with a cold laugh, 'cause that's exactly where we're going. Only difference is, I've got a bed of evidence, and you've got nothing but lies and empty threats. The boss stood up, the chair screeching against the floor like a war cry. Get out of my office, and get out of our lives. You're finished here. And with that, James's fate was sealed. In the courtroom, the evidence weighed heavier than his words, heavier than his anger. The judge didn't hesitate, hitting the gavel like a nail in the coffin of our married life. Sentence you to pay the compensation, and this court grants the separation, the judge announced, and it was like the first breath of spring air, chilly but promising blooms. Back at the job, I slid into the familiar groove of my work, but with a new shine on it. I wasn't just doing tasks, I was rebuilding. Every keystroke was a brick, every good morning mortar, every completed project a pillar in the house of my new life. Kate, my colleague Mark said, breaking my concentration. Must feel weird, huh? Getting everything back? I swiveled in my chair, facing him. Weird doesn't start to cover it, Mark. Feels like I've come back from the dead. Mark chuckled, his laughter rumbling like an old pickup truck. Zombie Kate, back for revenge. I cracked a smile. Something like that. Only this time, I'm not taking any crap from anyone. No more Mrs. Nice Gal. That's the spirit. You know, we all got your back here, no matter what. I nodded. The warmth in the office was more than the heating. It was the camaraderie, a shared fortress against any storm that might come.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
"Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak.
"There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer."
"Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
"Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.